following video may contain sequences which some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
I want you to take a moment and think about the person that you love and cherish the most in your life. Did you think about them? If I may ask, who was it? Was it your significant other? Or maybe it was your parents? Or perhaps your son or daughter? I want you to now think about someone trying to hurt them. What would you do? Surely you would protect them, right? After all, this is the person you cherish the most. I'm sure you would do anything to protect them. You see, when people form a strong bond with another, they feel compelled to protect them. A lot of times when they're in distress, you're in distress. It's true. When you reach a certain level of closeness with someone, just them being in a bad mood is enough to put you in a bad mood, and then the feeling of wanting to get them out of a bad mood comes in. Even if it's just a close friend. If someone heard that their best friend got in trouble, a lot of times they'd be there at their friend's side, ready to help. It's just human nature. That feeling is intensely magnified when it comes to someone you love and care about, beyond just being friends. No, I don't just mean significant others. I'm sure all of us with someone like that in our lives know that if anyone did anything to threaten them, you'd probably want to lay them out. I'm talking about families as well. A lot of times, even if you don't necessarily like a family member, like say a brother, you'd still do anything for them. It's like this overwhelming force that just makes whatever argument you can come up with in your head to not aid them, end with, "But he's my brother, so I guess I'll just do it." I know that sentiment is relatable for a lot of us. But what about if you had a child? A little girl or a little boy? Normally, parents are protective of their children and would do anything to keep them from danger. Even if they aren't so little anymore. Parents are normally just compelled to protect their child. Now, with all that being said, I want you to imagine yourself in this situation. You have a daughter. You've been with her entire life. Watched her first steps, her first words, her first day at school, everything. She's your pride and joy. She gets older and naturally she starts getting interested with boys. Until she eventually finds a boyfriend whom she thought that she was happy with, only to find out that it was all a ruse to gain her trust, and the boyfriend abandoned her. Then sold her into a sex-trafficking organization in a city far away from your own. What would you do? Our case today takes place in Spokane, Washington. John Eisenman, age 60, a father, was arrested and charged with first-degree murder in relation to the death of 19-year-old Andrew Sorensen, his daughter's ex-boyfriend. Andrew's body was found in the trunk of an abandoned vehicle on October 22, 2021. Things get a little more complicated from here, as the body was found on October 22nd, but it had been there for months. Almost a year to be precise. John was very open about everything, because in his eyes, what he did was justified. I will let you decide for yourself whether what he did was justified or not, so let's get into what happened. John had a daughter, and she started dating Andrew. She was happy with the relationship, but Andrew had a reason for dating her in the first place. It would seem Andrew saw her as an asset rather than a lover, and he sold her into a organization in the Seattle area for $1,000. Yes, you heard right. To him, her life was worth $1,000. Luckily though, John and his fiancée was able to rescue her shortly after and bring her back home to Washington. To be honest, he was very lucky. Usually these situations end much worse. When someone is sold into one of those organizations, they get tossed around pretty quickly, and you would be surprised just how sick these people can get. What these people do to the women that are sold to them is enough to scar them for life. There's no age restrictions either. Sometimes even children are sold into that kind of life, and those they're sold to treat them just the same as an adult, or even worse. Also, may I mention that John's daughter was not a child, but she was When John got back to Washington with his fiancée and his daughter, he was angry, and rightfully so. Any father who loves and cherishes his child would never just accept that his daughter was just sold into an organization where they would just forcefully use her as their own personal. However, John did not let the authorities handle the case. He took matters into his own hands. He tracked down Andrew. He learned that he would be at a certain trailer park in November 2020. Now, it would seem like he did all this without his family knowing. If they did, they also would have been charged, but I digress. He confronted Andrew. After all his searching, finally, the one to blame for nearly destroying his daughter's life was in front of him. As with many of us, his anger just could not be contained. He abducted him, tied his hands and feet with zip ties, then put him in the trunk of a car. A car belonging to his fiancée. A car that his fiancée thought was stolen, up until recently. He drove to a remote location in North Spokane County, and it was there that John decided to pay Andrew back in full for what he did. He hit him in the head with a cinder block, then stabbed him over and over and over again, until Andrew eventually succumbed to his injuries. After which, John closed the trunk, removed the battery of the car, then left. The vehicle stayed there for months, until sometime in October 2021, when it was moved by an unnamed individual. At this time, it is believed that the individual had no idea there was a body in the trunk of the car. Regardless, the vehicle with the body still within was moved all the way to East Everett Avenue. And the discovery was made when police responded to a report of a foul odor emanating from the vehicle. They promptly contacted the owner of the vehicle, who, as stated earlier, was John's fiancée, Brenda Cross. The one who opened the door to the house when the police arrived was John. He didn't act suspiciously though, so the police had no reason to believe he was involved. Brenda explained to the investigators that the car was stolen the year before. She also made the police aware of what happened to their daughter the previous year. And it is this information that would prove to be the link needed to connect John with this case. Because the very next thing that happened after they left was a neighbor contacting them, telling them that John had admitted someone and hiding their body in the trunk of a car. How the neighbor knew this is unknown at this time. Perhaps after the police left, John had a talk with Brenda and he came clean, and the neighbor was being nosy and eavesdropped. Or maybe the neighbor and John were friends and John told him that in confidence. Or maybe they're just some things the police chose to withhold from the public. We just don't know at this time. Needless to say, however, after hearing Brenda's story about what happened with the deceased the year prior, and the phone call from their neighbor, John was called in for questioning, where he admitted to confronting and killing Andrew in November 2020. This story is an interesting one. Unlike a lot of the cases we deal with here where there is a very straightforward answer as to who's right and who's wrong, this case is heavily opinionated. Was John justified? Well, if we go according to the law, no. The police needed to get involved and an investigation needed to take place. But that can no longer happen because Andrew Sorensen is already dead. But let's just try to analyze why John did what he did. First of all, we are not by any means condoning or encouraging any vigilante-type behavior. We are simply trying to understand why John, who had no history of violence whatsoever, decided to kill a man instead of letting the police handle it. I mean, he had already rescued his daughter. So everything was okay, right? Just tell the cops and let them handle it. Well, not exactly. Just because he got his daughter back does not necessarily mean that she was safe. What if, hypothetically, Andrew found out she was brought back to her home? What would stop him from again? He had contacts with the organization. I don't think it needs to be said that dangerous people are associated with those kinds of activities. His daughter would always live in fear knowing that Andrew was still out there, and she wouldn't know if he was pursuing her or not, and whenever she did find out, it would probably already be too late. Besides that, remember what I asked you in the beginning of this video? How I walked you through thinking of your loved ones and what you would do if they were threatened. Now you may be saying, I don't think I would go that far. And to that I would say two things. One, maybe you're right, you wouldn't go that far. Not all people are the same. Some people are willing to kill for someone they love. You might not be one of them, but they do exist, and John Eisenman is one of those people. And two, I don't think you've ever been in that situation. It's very easy to look on the outside and say, he should have just gotten a hold of himself and let the authorities handle it. But when you're the one in that situation, and you're the one who needs to keep your own emotions in check, it could be a very different story. And one more thing, what if he did go to the authorities, and nothing happens? It is not uncommon for cases like this to be swept under the rug because it's a case of he says, she says. A lot of times there's no solid evidence showing that these things really happened. If there was solid evidence, it would not exist. You don't make those kind of transactions expecting to get a receipt at the end of it. Just how could you prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Andrew really did sell her? Especially if the people involved just chooses to lie and say you're making this up. Again, if ever placed in a situation like this, the right and lawful thing to do is to let the police handle it. But can you really blame John for doing what he did? He wanted the person who did this to never get the chance to do it again. He took matters into his own hands, yes, and maybe even let his emotions and anger get the better of him. But all he wanted to do was to protect his girl and anyone else from Andrew. With Andrew gone, that's another seller that's out of the market. Of course, someone could say that John isn't an investigator. What if he was wrong? Well, I think we could all assume that his daughter was the one who told him who sold her. What reason would she have to lie on her boyfriend at the time? And a lie that's serious no less. It's unlikely. And let's be real for a second. Which one of us would take the word of someone else when your daughter, who was just sold into a organization, told you who sold her there? I'm sure little to none of us would even think about doing that. I'm sure there are a lot of people who would say that John was indeed justified, and Andrew got what he deserved. But according to the law, the person in the wrong here was John. And more than likely with his confession, he will be convicted and will have to serve considerable time in a cell. This is definitely controversial, but what I can say is, I am sure John Eisenman has no regrets. He did what he did to protect his girl, and he will never apologize for that. Whether he was right or wrong is up to you to decide. But I think we can all be happy knowing that there is one less waiting to prey on unsuspecting women. Andrew Sorensen is gone, and can no longer hurt anybody. Now, with all this being said, put yourself in John's shoes, and I want to ask you one more time. What would you have done?